The towering Rancho Castle casts its imposing shadow across the sprawling Rancho kingdom. Aaliyah stands quietly observing the surrounding courtyard with a calm demeanor. A cheerful companion suggests grabbing lunch to satisfy their hungry stomachs. Charlotte hears her name shouted loudly across the bustling castle grounds. A friend praises Charlotte's relentless work ethic while noting everyone else slacks off. Charlotte casually dismisses the praise by claiming she has no idea how to spend her free time. Smiling warmly, Charlotte insists she must do her absolute best since she gets paid for her labor. Observing her intense dedication to her mundane duties, her friend playfully teases the diligent Charlotte for being overwhelmingly serious. The gentle teasing affectionately continues as her friend points out her strict demeanor persists even though she is undeniably beautiful. Eagerly shifting the conversation toward hunting, a friend promises to hunt a stag and enthusiastically offers Charlotte the resulting fur. Shocking her deeply surprised companions, Charlotte plainly reveals that no one except her intoxicated father has ever called her beautiful. Realizing Charlotte lives near the eponymous forest, her friends enthusiastically offer to buy her anything at the shop, earning a grateful thank you. Pledging lifelong loyalty in a jubilant cheer, a friend excitedly details their meticulous plans to expertly tan the fur with salt and alum. Stepping seamlessly back into her fiercely responsible persona, Charlotte politely interrupts the joyful banter to ask if they should finally get to work. Noting her distinctly innocent demeanor, her observant friend gently points out that Charlotte has never experienced any genuine romantic encounters before. A soft, radiant aura seemingly blooms around Charlotte visually, capturing the quiet beauty and sheer warmth that effortlessly disarms those around her. Entirely captivated by her gentle expression, her friend helplessly sighs and playfully admits total defeat against that overwhelmingly charming smile. Readily agreeing with the light-hearted sentiment, Charlotte warmly calls out to Aaliyah, cementing the joyful bond shared among the working friends. Sudden footsteps echo ominously across the stone floors, signaling an unexpected approach that swiftly shatters the previously relaxed and cheerful atmosphere. Emerging from a shifting shadows with a tense expression, Milo steps into view and completely halts the women's light-hearted conversation. Hesitating for a brief, awkward moment, Milo nervously stammers before directly calling out Charlotte's name in a desperate bid for her attention. Pressing for an answer regarding a romantic proposition, Milo is swiftly shut down as Charlotte firmly reminds him she already declined his offer to date. A heavy, suffocating silence violently crashes over the space as the stinging reality of Charlotte's unwavering rejection hangs palpably in the tense air. Frantically attempting to justify his misguided hopes, Milo argues her polite smiles meant affection, forcing Charlotte to bluntly declare his complete misunderstanding. His desperate confusion rapidly mutating into boiling anger, and utterly furious Milo aggressively questions if Charlotte has been intentionally making a fool of him. The volatile tension abruptly snaps as sudden violent movement blurs across the space, completely erasing any remaining semblance of peaceful diplomacy. Recoiling from his aggressive and unwanted advance, a deeply uncomfortable Charlotte sharply commands the escalating Milo not to touch her. Completely consumed by his raging, humiliated fury, Milo snarls in dangerous disbelief as he aggressively prepares to force the violent issue. Intervening with terrifying speed, a powerful hand firmly clasps Milo's wrist while a commanding voice loudly orders that this harassment is enough. The sudden, forceful intervention instantly freezes the chaotic altercation, rapidly shifting the turbulent power dynamic as a formidable new presence physically anchors the scene. Awe and sudden recognition ripple through the tense onlookers as they immediately identify the imposing savior as Lord Shimon of the White Hawk Squad. Startled and intensely intimidated by the sudden interference, a visibly shaken Milo demands to know the identity of the powerful man obstructing him. Questioning if she led him on, Lord Shimon listens as Charlotte firmly denies it, explaining the man's workplace conversations were deeply troubling. Trembling under the crushing weight of the night's intense glare, a deeply terrified Milo pathetically stammers in a desperate attempt to formulate an excuse. The suffocating pressure radiating from the towering night intensely thickens the air, severely punishing the harasser with an overwhelming aura of absolute authority. Leveraging his immense authority as a member of the White Hawk Squad, Lord Shimon sternly warns the cowardly aggressor never to approach Charlotte again. Turning his protective attention back to the shaken woman, Lord Shimon softly asks Charlotte if she remains physically and emotionally unharmed. Rejecting the notion of being a helpless victim, a heavily burdened Charlotte defensively insists that his well-intentioned assumption is not entirely accurate. Bowing her head in shame, Charlotte sincerely apologizes for troubling the night, regretfully asserting she should have capably handled the situation herself. Silently understanding her fierce need for independent dignity, Lord Shimon quietly accepts her apology while offering a reassuring presence that speaks volumes. Offering gentle reassurance, Lord Shimon kindly advises Charlotte that she can rely on others when trouble strikes. Curious about her physical prowess, he asks if she descends from a knight's lineage, but she firmly denies it. Confused by her resolute answer, he attempts to question her further before she abruptly excuses herself from the conversation. Refusing to let the subject drop, he praises her impressive broom work and notes she was practicing swings the other day. Maintaining her strict professionalism, Charlotte coldly insists she is busy working and formally requests to be excused. Left standing alone as she walks away, quickly a bewildered Shimon wonders if he has somehow earned her absolute dislike. Slipping into a quiet moment of vulnerability later on, Charlotte rests as soft breathing fills the silent room. Snapping suddenly out of her deep daze, Charlotte gasps as the memories of the day rush back. Overwhelmed by her recent awkward interactions, a deeply flustered expression takes over her usually composed face. Noticing her obvious distress, Aaliyah asks if something happened, but Charlotte quickly brushes it off as nothing. Pressing the issue gently, Aaliyah points out she is spacing out and asks if she is truly okay. Dropping her guard slightly in front of her friend, Charlotte quietly admits that she simply wants to return home. Hoping to lift her spirits, Aaliyah enthusiastically invites her to visit the royal capital together on their day off tomorrow. Declining the offer, softly Charlotte listens as Aaliyah sympathetically expresses hope that her missing parents will finally return. Drifting into fond memories, Charlotte reflects on the many valuable lessons her beloved mother taught her since childhood. Her mother's voice echoes in her mind, advising her to gaze at a speaker's nose and offer a polite smile. A young Charlotte cheerfully agrees to her mother's advice, promising to act deeply interested in whatever others discuss. Weighed down by the harsh present reality, a somber Charlotte casts her eyes downward in heavy contemplation. Realizing her polite manners caused painful misunderstandings, she sadly decides it is better not to use them at the castle. Filled with deep regret over the day's events, she laments her inability to properly thank the knight who saved her. Curling up in the quiet shadows of her room, a profound sadness envelopes the exhausted young woman. Tears threatening to fall, she softly calls out into the empty room for her missing father and mother. Clutching her sheets in desperation, she tearfully begs to know where her beloved parents have gone. Squeezing her pillow tightly against her chest, she desperately seeks comfort in the cold and lonely night. Silent tears streak down her face as the overwhelming grief of her solitary existence finally shatters her composure. Heartbroken and entirely alone, she whispers a fragile, desperate plea to see her family just one more time. Shattering the heavy sorrow of the night, a rooster crows loudly to announce the arrival of a brand new morning. Golden sunlight washes over the towering walls of the castle as a new day dawns brightly over the kingdom. Rustling the crisp sheets, Charlotte pushes past her lingering exhaustion and rises determinedly from her empty bed. Moving with practiced efficiency, she quickly changes her clothes and prepares herself to face the demanding day ahead. Tying her hair back with focused precision, she locks away her vulnerability and fully restores her stoic exterior. Stepping forward with renewed purpose, the sharp clack of her movements echoes through the early morning silence. Leaving the quiet sanctuary of her room behind, she strides purposefully into the bustling environment of the castle. Breaking the morning quiet, a familiar voice calls out approvingly as she arrives for her scheduled departure. Handing her provisions for the journey, the head chef tells her to take breakfast, earning her warm and immediate gratitude. Bidding the kind head chef a cheerful farewell, Charlotte announces she is officially heading out for her day off. Stepping out into the bright morning, the joyful chirping of birds greets her as she embarks on her familiar journey. Walking down the quiet path, she solemnly reflects that an entire year has passed since her parents mysteriously vanished. Navigating the peaceful surroundings, she makes her way steadily toward the quiet house of her childhood. Holding onto a fragile thread of hope, she reveals that she spends every day off returning home to wait for them. Charlotte steadfastly maintains her vital routine by thoughtfully bringing extra food, just in case her missing parents return hungry. Breaking into a sudden sprint, she eagerly races through the quiet woods, with hopeful anticipation propelling her swift footsteps. Clutching her packed provisions tightly, she joyfully envisions her weary family, finally enjoying the hearty lunch she lovingly prepared. Shock violently paralyzes her as she abruptly spots thick smoke billowing steadily from the chimney of her supposedly abandoned home. Heart pounding wildly in her chest, she cautiously inches closer to the rustic cabin to investigate the mysterious and terrifying intrusion. Gasping sharply as sudden realization strikes her as she intensely surveys the unsettling scene unfolding before her wide eyes. A quiet rustle from the overgrown foliage instantly draws her sharp attention toward the neglected and overgrown front yard. Surveying the scattered debris, she realizes something is incredibly strange about the messy condition of the exterior grounds. Knowing her meticulous mother would never leave fallen leaves scattered so carelessly, she grows deeply suspicious of the unkempt surroundings. Creeping silently toward the wooden structure, she peers cautiously through the heavy gloom to uncover the identity of the trespasser. Freezing abruptly in her tracks, she presses herself tightly against the rough wall to remain completely undetected by the intruder. Listening intently to the eerie silence, she nervously notes that there is absolutely no sound coming from within the dark house. A sudden flinch violently shakes her frame as she spots an unfamiliar and imposing figure lurking deep within the shadows. Panic violently spikes in her chest as she realizes she does not recognize the mysterious man occupying her sacred childhood home. Gasping in sheer terror, she frantically worries about what devastating events might unfold if something terrible happens in the isolated woods. Remembering the noble knight who previously saved her, she decisively resolves that she absolutely cannot cause him any more trouble. Weighing her severely limited options, she nervously debates calling for help, but fears the intruder might wreck the house before nights arrive. Bursting violently through the front door with a broom raised high, she fiercely orders the startled intruder to get out immediately. Swinging her makeshift wooden weapon with all her might, she launches a desperate and aggressive assault against the towering stranger. Reacting with lightning speed, the intruder effortlessly dodges her frantic strike as the heavy broom violently cleaves the empty air. Pivoting sharply on his heel, the mysterious man swiftly counters her aggressive momentum to neutralize the sudden and unexpected threat. Crying out in sharp pain, Charlotte is effortlessly overpowered and quickly knocked off balance by the incredibly agile stranger. Tumbling forcefully to the solid wooden floor, her frantic and desperate assault ends in an immediate and crushing physical defeat. Looming intimidatingly over her fallen form, the dark-haired intruder stares down at her with an overwhelmingly commanding presence. Glaring fiercely up at her imposing captor, Charlotte defiantly declares that this invaded house rightfully belongs to her. Mustering every ounce of her remaining courage, she coldly and furiously commands the towering stranger to get out of her home. Surprised by her fierce declaration, the man lets out a sudden breath as the tense reality of the dangerous situation finally settles. Releasing his forceful grip, he calmly explains that her sudden screaming completely startled him into reacting with defensive violence. Quickly pulling away from his imposing figure, a deeply flustered Charlotte frantically stammers out a confused and hesitant apology. Scrambling backward in lingering terror, she orders him not to come closer while he gruffly apologizes for his rough treatment. Explaining his desperate situation, he reveals he got hopelessly lost on the freezing road and planned to leave money before departing. Staring blankly at the exhausted stranger, she quietly absorbs his pathetic excuse with wary skepticism and lingering fear. His stomach growling loudly in the tense silence, the imposing man awkwardly admits his fault and openly confesses he is starving. Rejecting his offer of payment, Charlotte sternly reminds him that her home is not an inn and firmly demands he leave. Spotting her dropped provisions on the floor, the hungry intruder curiously points out her delicious breakfast of eggs, ham, and bread. Infuriated by his casual audacity, she desperately yells at him to get out while he stubbornly and bluntly refuses her command. Offering a surprising compromise, he casually suggests they split the food so he can feel significantly less guilty about trespassing. Swearing to repay her reluctant kindness someday, he finally convinces the deeply exhausted Charlotte to cautiously agree to his terms. Sitting together in an awkward but peaceful truce, the two unlikely companions silently prepare to share the simple hearty meal. Breaking the quiet tension with unexpected and genuine gratitude, the towering stranger sincerely thanks her for the desperately needed food. The serene morning air settles over the rustic landscape as a new day gently begins. Lamenting the frustrating loss of her hearty breakfast, Charlotte sets out to fetch fresh water from the nearby well. A cheerful chirp breaks the morning silence as her little bird companion Pickett happily greets her. Apologizing for lacking a proper lunchbox, she generously offers gathered walnuts to her tiny feathered friend. A sharp clack echoes through the quiet space as she gently pushes the heavy wooden door open. Stepping into the empty house, she softly announces her return while admitting just how much she missed her family. Warm flames crackle vibrantly to life in the stone hearth, casting a comforting glow across the darkened room. The cozy interior of her childhood home stands perfectly preserved in quiet anticipation of its missing owners. A sudden rustle shifts through the quiet room as she carefully begins inspecting the stored supplies. Sighing in profound relief, she happily confirms that her father's wheat and hidden money both remain perfectly safe. Dust motes dance gracefully in the soft shafts of sunlight, illuminating the peaceful solitude of the wooden cabin. Gently stroking Pickett, she apologizes for the delay and kindly asks the eager bird to wait just a little longer. Time ticks steadily forward as she focuses her attention on preparing a modest but warm meal. Moving with practiced efficiency, she swiftly chops the simple ingredients to begin her solitary cooking session. Fresh water bubbles rapidly in the heavy iron pot as comforting heat quickly fills the small kitchen. Seasoning falls in a delicate shower as she carefully sprinkles aromatic herbs into the simmering broth. A rich, delicious aroma rises from the thick stew, promising a meager but desperately needed comfort. Setting the humble meal on the wooden table, she warmly invites her little companion to finally eat. Responding to Pickett's curious chirp, a weary Charlotte frankly admits that today was a truly rough experience. Releasing a heavy sigh, she slumps defeatedly into her wooden chair as exhaustion fully overtakes her small frame. Reflecting on her 16th birthday, she bitterly realizes the past year has been a relentless string of awful events. A bittersweet memory flashes vividly in her mind as a younger Charlotte cheerfully thanks her parents for their gifts. Her mother gifts her warm, hand-knitted socks while recalling the countless practical life skills they taught her since childhood. Her father proudly presents a beautiful red sword, while her mother reflects on teaching her aristocratic manners and simple cooking. Her mother's rigorous lessons included proper greetings, elegant posture, refined conversation, and the grim skill of butchering meat. Her seasoned hunter father rigorously trained her in archery, distancing, and daily sword practice to ensure her ultimate survival. Gazing at her with unconditional love, her parents warmly declare she is their precious treasure despite lacking blood ties. They tenderly embrace her as their cherished daughter, firmly cementing a bond far stronger than mere genetics. Charlotte solemnly remembers how her hardworking father exhausted himself hunting every single day to provide for them. Tears prick her eyes as she recalls her devoted mother pushing through severe illness just to knit her warm clothes. Clutching her precious memories close to her heart, she fiercely reaffirms that their lack of blood relation absolutely does not matter. The devastating memory of a hastily written note stating they would return at night violently shatters her inner peace. The mysterious letter claims they left quietly without waking her to visit relatives as previously planned. The harsh reality of their sudden and absolute disappearance hangs incredibly heavy in the suffocating silence of the room. She reveals that this crucial note, written in her mother's distinct handwriting, had been secretly prepared since she was 10. The desperate instructions explicitly ordered her to seek an arranged job in Kingstone if they vanished for 5 days. Tears streaming down her face, she desperately cries out for her missing parents, unable to bear the endless waiting. Sensing her profound grief, the loyal Pickett chirps softly in a touching attempt to comfort his heartbroken friend. Wiping her stray tears away, Charlotte fiercely resolves to live an honorable life that her parents would never be ashamed of. Standing tall, with unbreakable determination, she completely steels her resolve to bravely face whatever challenges the harsh world throws next. Reflecting on her past, Charlotte warmly acknowledges the deep care her adoptive parents gave her as an abandoned child for 16 years. Arriving in Kingstone, Charlotte introduces herself and follows her mother Martha's strict instructions to visit the Edel Trading Company. The merchant greets her with a knowing remark about her long-awaited arrival, leaving the young woman slightly confused. Wondering why her mother secretly arranged this backup plan, Charlotte silently processes the sudden and jarring revelation. The merchant reveals Martha visited years ago to secure her future by paying a brokerage fee and praising Charlotte's strong work ethic. Charlotte expresses shock when a merchant firmly assigns her a menial working position within the massive royal castle. Accepting her new fate with quiet determination, Charlotte bows her head and sincerely thanks the merchant for his necessary help. The merchant explains that while Martha preferred a merchant's house, the royal castle ultimately offers the best possible wages. He pragmatically points out that given her current desperate situation, there is absolutely no better workplace available. Sending her off on her new path, the merchant gruffly but kindly encourages her to work incredibly hard. Stepping out of the bustling trading company, Charlotte braces herself to bravely face her demanding new reality. Flashing back to her departure, Charlotte ensures the door is locked after thoroughly cleaning the house and leaving a hopeful note. A soft rustling sound breaks the tense silence as she carefully secures her cherished childhood home before leaving. Glancing back one last time, a heavy wave of bittersweet nostalgia violently washes over the young woman. Hearing a familiar chirp, Charlotte solemnly reflects that her once warm home feels incredibly lonely without her missing parents. Her little bird companion Pickett tilts its head and chirps questioningly at her deeply melancholic demeanor. Snapping out of her gloomy thoughts, she quietly agrees with her own solemn realization about the painfully empty house. Checking the time, she realizes she must return to the castle and gently asks Pickett if he wants to accompany her. Reconsidering her offer, she warmly decides the forest is better for Pickett because he already has friends safely residing there. Acknowledging her deep internal struggle, Charlotte softly confesses to the bird that she is the only one who is truly lonely. The ominous sound of rustling bushes abruptly shatters the quiet peace of the surrounding dense woods. Gripping her self-defense knife, Charlotte bravely reassures herself that she is perfectly fine and completely unafraid. A sudden alarming noise violently spikes her adrenaline and instantly puts the hyper-aware girl on high alert. Freezing in place, she intensely scans the dense undergrowth for any sign of a hidden or lurking threat. Releasing a heavy sigh of relief, she spots a harmless wild rabbit nervously emerging from the thick green foliage. Watching the tiny creature hop away, her racing heartbeat slowly begins to settle back to a normal rhythm. Taking a deep and steadying breath, she firmly repeats to herself that everything is going to be perfectly okay. Clutching her small weapon tightly, she fiercely vows to rely on her rigorous training and fully protect herself. Forcing a brave face despite her lingering anxiety, she pushes forward with unsteady but unbreakable determination. A sudden familiar voice completely startles her as Lord Shimon unexpectedly crosses her lonely path once again. Startled by his sudden appearance, Charlotte freezes with wide eyes as her heart sharply races in her chest. Noticing her deeply distressed demeanor, the towering knight immediately expresses genuine concern for her unusually pale complexion. Catching her breath, a heavily flustered Charlotte hastily attempts to regain her strict and professional composure. Deflecting his gentle concern, she politely insists that she is completely fine and requires absolutely no assistance. Pausing thoughtfully, Lord Shimon gently acknowledges his own personal flaws before addressing her obvious emotional distress. Leaning in with an observant gaze, he softly explains that his own painful experiences allow him to easily see through her tough exterior. Capturing her full attention, the imposing knight prepares to deliver a piece of heartfelt and highly unexpected advice. Breaking through her formidable emotional walls, He kindly reassures her that she does not have to lie and pretend she is fine. Offering his unwavering protection, he proudly declares that supporting struggling people is the true purpose of the White Hawk Squad. Moved deeply by his unexpected kindness, the heavy burdens of her solitary life finally begin to slowly slip away. Admitting she walked too much and feels a little tired, Charlotte heavily leans against the quiet forest trees. Losing her fragile balance completely, the exhausted young woman suddenly collapses weakly onto the soft ground. Assuring the worried knight she will stand shortly, she quietly confesses she was deeply anxious this entire time. Charlotte silently realizes his unexpectedly kind words miraculously blew all her heavy anxiety completely away. Apologizing for the sudden intrusion, a flustered Shimon abruptly scoops the startled Charlotte into his strong arms. Carrying her effortlessly, the towering knight begins walking steadily through the tranquil and sunlit woods. Introducing himself formally as Shimon, for he nervously admits he is simply not used to interacting with women. Charlotte points out his bright red face and worries he has a fever, but a panicking Shimon frantically denies it. Smiling softly at his highly nervous demeanor, she officially introduces herself as Charlotte. Calling his name, gently, she sincerely thanks Lord Shimon for kindly helping her in her moment of desperate need. A sudden gentle breeze sweeps through the peaceful forest as the two continue their quiet journey together. Panicking as his blush deepens severely, Shimon desperately tells her not to worry, while Charlotte voices further concern. Leaving a new handwritten letter behind, Charlotte bravely writes to her missing parents that she will definitely return. The written note warmly reassures her beloved family that she is safely working at the bustling royal castle. Concluding her heartfelt message, she gently urges her absent parents not to worry about her ongoing well-being. The quiet interior of her childhood home stands perfectly still as she silently departs for the royal capital once more. A soft rustle of clothing echoes ominously as someone mysterious begins moving purposefully through a different location. Meanwhile, in the bustling royal capital of the Ranchal Kingdom, eager citizens enthusiastically whisper about a tall blonde beauty. The animated gossips passionately praise the stunning elegance of the mysterious woman, capturing everyone's attention. A patron confidently confirms the breathtakingly beautiful woman in question is undeniably the hard-working Charlotte. Rumors fiercely circulate that Charlotte is so incredibly proper that no man could ever hope to win her over. Informants eagerly reveal she works at the castle as a versatile servant and diligently returns home on every day off. An amused bystander teasingly asks the intrigued stranger if he also fell deeply in love with Charlotte at first sight. Shifting the scene abruptly, a polite clerk warmly asks how they can help the imposing new customer today. The bustling Edel Trading Company proudly welcomes the towering dark-haired stranger into their busy mercantile establishment. The intimidating man bluntly asks for any available castle work openings to secure his immediate employment. A fierce inner monologue echoes a powerful vow to fiercely protect someone important with his own bare hands. Excited cheers erupt through the crowded streets as the elite White Hawk Squad proudly returns from rigorous training. Thrilled onlookers enthusiastically scream Lord Shimon's name as the handsome knight formally leads his distinguished squad. Riding gracefully on his majestic steed, Shimon calmly surveys the roaring crowd of highly devoted admirers. Swooning women passionately praise Shimon's irresistible gentle expression and overwhelmingly handsome features. The triumphant parade of elite knights moves steadily through the vibrant and heavily populated royal capital. Wild rumors claim Shimon flawlessly defeated 10 thugs simultaneously and effortlessly slayed a giant bear with a single sword. Escaping the exhausting public spectacle, a heavily fatigued Shimon releases a deep sigh of immense relief. A fellow knight approaches the resting Shimon to playfully tease him about his overwhelming and ridiculous public popularity. Laughing heartily, his amused companion jokingly questions exactly when Shimon started effortlessly slaying giant bears. Shimon fiercely glares at his laughing friend and sharply commands him not to tease him about the absurd stories. Expressing deep annoyance, Shimon firmly complains that citizens spreading such absurd nonsense is an absolute nuisance. The lighthearted banter is instantly shattered when someone suddenly and urgently calls out Charlotte's name in the distance. Reacting instantly to the familiar name, a startled Shimon quickly turns his full attention toward the unexpected commotion. Startled by the sudden outburst, Shimon learns that the mysterious Maid is actually quite famous among their squad. Teased relentlessly by his comrade, Shimon realizes his hopeless reputation with women is now tied to her. Warned that the dark blonde Charlotte flatly rejects all suitors, Shimon questions why he would become her next rejected conquest. Despite her untouchable reputation, Shimon cannot help but feel a deep and nagging worry for her well-being. Apologizing for his sudden confusion, the flustered swordsman admits he completely fails to understand his own swirling emotions. His comrade sighs in exasperation, noting that while Shimon is an absolute master with the blade, he remains entirely clueless about love. Lost in her own world, Charlotte silently contemplates the heavy burdens resting upon her shoulders. Burdened by the absence of her parents, she steels her resolve to protect their home all on her own. Checking on her condition, Shimon is relieved when she politely confirms that she is finally feeling better. Surprised to see him, she greets Lord Shimon as he casually asks if she is dedicating another day to grueling training. A sudden wave of hesitation washes over her, leaving her momentarily speechless and struggling to voice her inner desires. Gathering her courage, she timidly asks Shimon to introduce her to someone capable of teaching her the way of the sword. Immediately backtracking, she nervously stammers that it is completely out of place for someone of her station to make such a bold request. Shattering her own hesitation, she fiercely declares her burning desire to become stronger. Acknowledging her fiery determination, Shimon simply and firmly understands her earnest plea. Shocking her completely, he casually offers himself as her morning sparring partner. Flustered by his incredible offer, she anxiously worries that taking up his precious time would be a massive burden. Brushing off her concerns, Shimon confidently steps forward and offers his own formidable blade to guide her. Leaning in with genuine interest, he admits a deep personal curiosity to witness her hidden swordsmanship firsthand. Gently scolding her stubborn independence, he reminds her of his previous advice to start relying heavily on the people around her. Overwhelmed by his unexpected kindness, she bows her head and offers a deeply heartfelt thanks. Stepping into the clearing, she respectfully asks for his guidance as they prepare to spar. Exploding into motion, she unleashes a fierce battle cry and charges directly at the seasoned knight. Their blades collide with a thunderous ringing of steel as the intense sparring session violently kicks off. Blocking her rapid strikes, Shimon mentally praises her lightning speed and the surprisingly heavy weight behind her properly trained attacks. Recognizing her raw talent, he swiftly shifts his stance to easily overpower her relentless assault. Panting heavily from the immense exertion, she graciously thanks him for the demanding and enlightening bout. Sheathing his sword, Shimon offers a compassionate ear to listen to whatever heavy burdens plague her mind. Praising her precise aim and excellent form, he astutely points out the dangerous undercurrent of impatience fueling her strikes. Breaking down her emotional walls, she hesitantly prepares to reveal the painful truth behind her desperation. A heavy silence descends upon the training ground as the crushing weight of her unspoken trauma hangs thickly in the air. Listening intently to her harrowing tale, Shimon finally understands the tragic events that forged her unyielding resolve. Validating her immense struggle, he softly acknowledges just how utterly terrifying that ordeal must have been for her. Laughing off the tension, he jokingly reminds her of his legendary bear-slaying reputation and commands her to rely on his strength next time. Flustered by his own sudden warmth, he frantically apologizes for unconsciously treating her exactly like his estranged little sister. Reflecting on his lost sibling, he admits that while they fought, she helped him survive times of unbearable hardship. Startled to learn of his family, Charlotte listens as Shimon solemnly confesses that he and his younger sister no longer get along. Deeply moved by his incredible vulnerability, she eagerly begs for another opportunity to train by his side whenever he has the time. Vowing to be her unwavering shield, Shimon promises to be there and commands her to call upon him whenever unease strikes. Staring at his retreating figure in sheer awe, Charlotte realizes she has never crossed swords with anyone quite like him since her own father. Smiling brightly after their intense sparring session, she cheerfully exclaims that the training was genuinely a lot of fun. Caught completely off guard by her radiant smile, Shimon starts to agree, but is suddenly overwhelmed by his own racing heart. Clutching his flushed face in absolute embarrassment, the seasoned knight groans loudly as a deep blush overtakes him. Panicking over his completely unfamiliar emotions, Shimon frantically realizes that the more he interacts with her, the less he understands himself. Noticing his bizarre and flustered behavior, a fellow squad member approaches and bluntly asks what is suddenly wrong with him. Watching the usually stoic swordsman unravel, completely his comrade lets out a heavy sigh of sheer exasperation. Standing at attention before her commanding officer, Charlotte receives sudden orders transferring her to assist the wardrobe department. Explaining that her current post draws too much unwanted attention, her superior firmly orders her to begin the reassignment tomorrow. Walking solemnly down the quiet stone corridor, Charlotte silently processes the heavy weight of her unexpected transfer. Accepting the inevitable change, she stoically reflects that after the dangerous incident with Milo, she fully expected this exact outcome. A painful pang of disappointment strikes her heart as she realizes she was just beginning to truly enjoy her current work. Suddenly bumping hard into a solid figure, Charlotte lets out a surprised gasp as she nearly loses her footing. Stumbling back to apologize, her eyes widen in absolute shock as she immediately recognizes the towering man standing before her. Startled by his unexpected presence, she defensively questions why Leo is suddenly standing right in the middle of the estate. Revealing he is currently working as a gardener's apprentice, he calmly explains he came specifically to return her bento wrapping. Bowing his head deeply, Leo offers a sincere and heavy apology for nearly causing her serious harm during their last encounter. Shifting the conversation entirely, Leo curiously questions why she was wandering so deeply into the dangerous forest that day. Pressing further into the mystery, he gently attempts to understand the real reason behind her reckless actions. Avoiding the deeper tragic truth, Charlotte simply and nervously admits that she ended up getting completely lost in the woods. Changing the subject with sudden intensity, Leo pointedly asks if her parents actually live in the secluded house with her. Lowering her gaze in deep sorrow, Charlotte confesses that her parents have been missing for a year and she is desperately searching for them. Offering his unwavering assistance, Leo promises to keep a close eye out, leaving Charlotte deeply grateful for his unexpected kindness. Praising her strong character, Leo warmly notes that her immense kindness and unyielding courage are truly remarkable traits. Absorbing his earnest and rare praise, Charlotte falls silent as a quiet understanding passes between the two unlikely acquaintances. Smiling softly at her dedication, Leo confidently states that her missing parents must be truly wonderful people to have raised her. Thinking fondly of her beloved family, Charlotte silently remembers her deeply respected father and mother with a heavy heart. Reflecting on her strange new acquaintance, she admits to herself that Leo initially seemed incredibly frightening when they first met. Miles away in a dark chamber, a shadowy superior harshly questions Leo regarding the current status of his ongoing search mission. Kneeling respectfully in the shadows, Leo formally reports that there is still absolutely no sign of their designated targets. The imposing silhouette of the Banteris kingdom looms ominously in the background as the dark and secretive meeting continues. Blissfully unaware of his true, deadly mission, Charlotte warmly wonders if the intimidating man might actually be a genuinely good person. Commanding absolute obedience, the dark superior firmly reminds Leo to fulfill his bloody duty the exact moment the targets are finally found. Dismissing the missing targets as likely dead after so many years, the superior coldly notes the total lack of physical evidence. Standing resolute despite the frustrating lack of proof, Leo silently acknowledges the grim reality of his hidden assignment. Reporting promptly for her brand new reassignment, Charlotte formally introduces herself to the bustling wardrobe department. Surveying her chaotic new environment, she quietly takes in the frantic energy of the heavily occupied tailoring room. Holding up a massive folded garment, she politely confirms the large uniform size with her new demanding supervisor. When bluntly asked about her tailoring knowledge, Charlotte honestly admits she has absolutely zero experience with clothing or fabrics. Introducing herself fiercely as wardrobe head Lucy, the strict woman immediately whips out a measuring tape to evaluate Charlotte thoroughly. Standing stiffly under the intense professional scrutiny, Charlotte nervously notes that she has never been measured this thoroughly before in her life. Continuing her thorough physical evaluation, wardrobe head Lucy meticulously takes the new recruit's measurements. Noting Charlotte's perfectly balanced physique and stable posture, Lucy curiously asks if she participates in any sports. Patting her shoulder, Lucy firmly declares that producing an ill-fitting uniform would completely shame their entire department. Handing over a thick manual, Lucy notices the unexpected muscle tone in the young servant's arms. Downplaying her physical strength, Charlotte humbly credits her toned arms to basic wooden sword practice. Establishing absolute authority, Lucy strictly commands her to always answer affirmatively to any given order. Standing at strict attention, Charlotte fiercely shouts her absolute compliance to the new rules. Flipping through the dense manual, she quickly realizes that even a general servant must memorize countless dress types and measurements. Tossing her a fresh notebook, Lucy orders her to meticulously write down and memorize all crucial information. Explaining their workflow, Lucy details how the massive department divides its labor and swiftly replaces anyone who leaves. Suddenly, an urgent shout echoes across the room, demanding the immediate delivery of the fifth white fabric. Springing into action, Charlotte yells her confirmation and sprints to fulfill the sudden request. Pivoting to her next task, she loudly confirms her orders as she begins sweeping the busy floor. Catching her breath, she spots the senior wardrobe staff enjoying delicious sweets and gazes at them longingly. Noticing her eager stare, a senior staff member casually orders Charlotte to fetch more sweets directly from a kitchen. Reflecting on her parents' training, she pushes herself to constantly predict the next necessary action, so her body moves automatically. Wiping the sweat from her brow, Charlotte takes a brief moment to recover from the relentless pace of her new job. Deeply grateful for her parents' enduring wisdom, she diligently records every new detail into her trusty notebook. Approaching with a warm smile, a senior staff member named Suzanne introduces herself and warmly thanks the new recruit. Several days later, Suzanne excitedly praises Charlotte for proving herself to be an incredibly capable worker. Eager to utilize her perfect proportions, Suzanne cheerfully invites Charlotte to her home to model a special dress. Politely declining the kind invitation, Charlotte explains she always returns to her own home on her precious days off. Revealing her tragic motivation, she softly explains that she must wait at the empty house for her missing parents. Clutching her chest, she admits her selfish desire to keep their beloved home perfectly ready for their eventual return. Despite a full year passing without a single trace, she stubbornly refuses to abandon her fading hope. Pivoting her strategy, Suzanne insists on bringing the dress to Charlotte's dorm room tonight as her colleague sighs at the familiar obsession. Overwhelmed by the intense request, Charlotte politely yields and accepts the sudden nighttime fitting. Watching the exchange, Luna sternly scolds Suzanne for phrasing the forceful invitation so ominously. Turning her attention to the eager tailor, Luna prepares to completely expose her colleague's true hidden motives. Luna loudly points out that Suzanne is merely desperate to see her masterpiece worn by someone with Charlotte's flawless figure. Eyes sparkling with fiery passion, Suzanne dramatically argues that true wardrobe beauty demands perfect overall balance rather than just being thin. Caught up in the artistic fervor, Luna vehemently agrees that achieving perfect balance is the ultimate beauty standard. Sweat dropping at their intense and intimidating enthusiasm, Charlotte suddenly feels a deep wave of anxious regret. A sudden bell chimes loudly through the busy halls, signaling an unexpected late-night summons. Surprised by the late hour, Charlotte asks if royal members actually call for service in the absolute middle of the night. Shrugging off the demanding schedule, Suzanne cheerfully skips away while Charlotte silently pities the exhausting workload. Confirming her target is room 303, Suzanne brightly promises to ambush Charlotte later for their mandatory fitting session. Exhausted from the chaotic shift, Charlotte finally makes her way down into the incredibly noisy dining hall. Gratefully accepting her meal, she receives a hearty plate of tonight's special pork dinner from the kitchen staff. Searching for an empty seat, she is suddenly greeted by a familiar voice casually pointing out her late arrival. Gratefully receiving her evening meal, Charlotte warmly thanks the kitchen staff for the delicious-looking food. Noticing her new routine, a co-worker enthusiastically comments on Charlotte's recent transfer to the bustling wardrobe department. Startled by the sudden inquiry, Charlotte confirms that her department officially changed starting today. Discussing her new role, she notes both the good and bad aspects of being constantly surrounded by elegant dresses. Taking a bite of her warm meal, she happily savors the truly delicious and comforting flavors. She marvels at how incredibly well the kitchen combined simple leftovers into such a high-quality dish. Recognizing her deep culinary knowledge, a friend praises Aaliyah as they discuss the lavish castle meals. Aaliyah explains that her brother worked in the kitchen, allowing her to easily identify the slightly old apples and leftover party wine. She hilariously recounts how senior male staff once drank all the leftover wine, forcing the kitchen to strictly use it for cooking. Feeling privileged, Charlotte silently thanks her mother's trading connections while appreciating the pure white bread and extra butter. Her friend Aaliyah gently apologizes for bothering the exhausted Charlotte after such a long and draining workday. Giving a sudden warning, Aaliyah informs Charlotte that a senior staff member from the wardrobe department will visit her room later. Reminding her that first impressions are absolutely crucial, Aaliyah advises Charlotte to be incredibly friendly to her superior. Bursting frantically into the room, the senior staff member, Suzanne, hastily apologizes for making Charlotte wait. Thanking her sister for helping carry the heavy shoes and accessories, Suzanne explains she could not manage the massive load alone. Greeting her energetic new guests politely, Charlotte bows and formally places herself in their experienced care. Brushing off the stiff formality, Suzanne fiercely insists that she is the one who should be looking after the newcomer. Unveiling a magnificent garment, Charlotte gasps in absolute awe at the breathtakingly beautiful deep green fabric. Eager to begin the impromptu fitting, the enthusiastic tailor immediately hands Charlotte the first piece of the grand outfit. Holding up the unfamiliar structural garment, Charlotte curiously asks her senior what exactly she is supposed to do with it. Suzanne explains that while a corset usually comes first, she confidently intends to fit Charlotte exactly as she is. Revealing a quick piece of wardrobe trivia, Suzanne proudly explains that the petticoat is primarily used to make the skirt puff outwards. Thrusting the elegant garments forward, she eagerly commands the flustered Charlotte to quickly try everything on. Stepping out in the completed outfit, Charlotte leaves her guests completely speechless with her undeniably stunning appearance. Flustered by the overwhelming and silent attention, Charlotte desperately begs Aaliyah to stop staring so intensely at her. Praising her flawless figure, Suzanne passionately declares that Charlotte looks exactly like a noble lady from every possible angle. Lamenting only that the shoes do not fit perfectly, Suzanne suddenly suggests they take the beautiful dress outside for a stroll. Overjoyed by her masterful creation, the tailor loudly proclaims that very few noble ladies actually possess such breathtaking beauty. Rejecting the highly embarrassing idea of leaving her room, Charlotte firmly refuses, while the tailor eagerly offers to take all the blame. Shaking her head frantically, Charlotte insists that going out near 9 o'clock will inevitably get her severely scolded by management. Pouting heavily in disappointment, the energetic tailor whines, while Aaliyah notes that Charlotte's new workplace seems quite mentally demanding. Suddenly realizing another opportunity, Suzanne excitedly prepares her next bold move as she gathers her remaining items. Slamming the heavy door to room 303, the enthusiastic guests finally bid the exhausted Charlotte a cheerful late-night farewell. Determined to see her vision fully realized, Suzanne loudly vows to force Charlotte to try the outfit again at work tomorrow. Standing completely dumbfounded in her newly quiet room, Charlotte can only stare blankly as she wishes herself good luck. The next morning, Charlotte finds herself back on the sunlit training grounds, crossing wooden swords with the formidable Lord Shimon. Deflecting a heavy strike, Shimon strictly teaches her that rapidly reading an opponent's next move is the absolute trick to staying alive. Absorbing his intense martial lesson, Charlotte tightens her grip and fiercely prepares for another rapid exchange of heavy blows. Swinging her wooden sword with all her might, she joyfully realizes that training alongside Lord Shimon remains as fun as ever. Sweeping her blunt blade through the crisp morning air, she feels the crushing weight of all her daily worries completely shrink away. Curious about her sudden interest in fashion, Shimon asks the young maid if she has been trying on elegant dresses. Confirming her senior's enthusiastic help, Charlotte admits she might even wear the stunning garment during her work shifts. Blushing slightly at the thought, the usually stoic swordsman softly confesses that he secretly wanted to see her in it too. Oblivious to his flustered state, she worriedly hopes her eager excitement won't result in a harsh scolding from her strict superiors. Noticing his uncharacteristic awkwardness, she teases the flustered Shimon while pointing out his strangely erratic behavior. A heavy, tense silence falls over the training grounds as the season night completely freezes in place. Sensing the sudden shift in atmosphere, Charlotte leans in closely and worriedly asks if something terrible has happened. Turning his flushed face away, Shimon quietly mutters to himself that his racing heart is definitely not playing a simple joke. Breaking the tension with a soft chuckle, he smiles warmly at her undeniable and pure-hearted innocence. Suddenly, the imposing and regal presence of Prince Aurelian is mentioned instantly, shifting the weight of the conversation. Quickly waving off her concern, the swordsman decisively ends the topic and assures her that absolutely nothing is wrong. High above the sprawling kingdom, the magnificent royal castle stands proudly under the bright morning sun. Springing into rapid motion, Charlotte dashes across the stone hallways to begin her grueling new wardrobe duties. Pumping her fists with blazing determination, she fiercely hypes herself up to conquer the day's massive workload. Sweeping the dusty floor with blinding speed, she meticulously cleans every single corner of the busy tailoring room. Respecting her incredibly strict supervisor, Charlotte understands that counting deadly needles together is vital for protecting the royal family. Embracing her lowly status, the diligent newcomer happily accepts that the exhausting morning cleaning is her absolute duty. Pausing her frantic sweeping, a tiny glint of color on the dusty floor instantly catches her sharp gaze. Picking up the discarded embroidery thread, she remembers her intense childhood, training, and confidently wonders if she should take it. Her mind suddenly spirals into darkness as she wildly questions how her missing parents obtained a massive hidden pile of gold coins. Desperate to save her hard-earned wages for her family, she realizes she could easily purchase her own thread now. Slapping her cheeks to banish the dark thoughts, she violently forces her scattered focus back onto her immediate cleaning duties. Despite her best efforts, the chilling realization hits her that her parents' combined income could never legitimately explain that impossible fortune. Bursting into the break room like a hurricane, an overly excited Suzanne dramatically demands everyone's immediate attention. Flaunting her ultimate masterpiece, the ecstatic tailor proudly reveals that Charlotte perfectly fits the ideal dress without a restrictive corset. Gasps of sheer disbelief erupt across the room as the stunned staff loudly demands to see the impossible feat with their own eyes. Taking absolute control of the chaotic room, the commanding Luna barks an order for a junior staffer to fetch everyone's lunch. Pivoting her fierce gaze toward the trembling newcomer, Luna directly orders Charlotte to model the breathtaking dress this instant. Stepping shyly into the bright light, Charlotte completely dazzles the entire room in the breathtakingly elegant garment. The seasoned tailors scream in absolute awe, totally mesmerized by the flawless corset-free silhouette she effortlessly displays. Bursting back through the door with fresh bread, the junior staffer loudly marvels how beautifully the dress comes alive on her. Swarming the overwhelmed girl, the frantic tailors confirm that absolutely zero adjustments were needed for the masterful creation. Squealing at the top of her lungs, a passionate stylist totally loses her mind over Charlotte's devastatingly gorgeous appearance. Trapping her in the center of the room, the obsessed designers outright refuse to let the starving girl remove the masterpiece. Clutching her agonizingly empty stomach, Charlotte silently weeps as her precious lunchtime slowly vanishes before her eyes. Completely ignoring her hunger, the hyperactive stylists fiercely debate applying deep crimson lipstick to perfectly match her flawless skin. Later that evening, an apologetic Suzanne breathes a heavy sigh and formally invites the exhausted girl out for a lavish meal. Flashing a brilliantly confident smile, the senior tailor promises her drained junior that she will absolutely love the upcoming outing. Staring upward in total bewilderment, Charlotte marvels at the massive, luxurious building towering directly in front of her. Welcoming her with open arms, Suzanne proudly declares that this magnificent high-end clothing shop is actually her very own home. Worrying she did not bring any gifts, Charlotte notes that her own mother's cooking is always delicious. Suzanne cheerfully dismisses her concerns and ushers her directly inside the house. Charlotte politely introduces herself and apologizes to Suzanne's parents for the sudden evening intrusion. Welcoming her warmly, Suzanne's mother invites her upstairs while insisting that adding one more to their family makes no difference. The lively family quickly gathers around a massive feast filled with steaming dishes. The siblings eagerly offer their favorite foods and praise their mother's amazing chicken bone soup. Savoring the warm meal, Charlotte marvels at the delicious flavor that feels distinctly different from her own mother's cooking. Suzanne's sister admires Charlotte's slim body and jokes that she maintains her perfect figure despite having such a healthy appetite. Suzanne and her mother enthusiastically agree as they watch their grateful guest enjoy the hearty dinner. Asked if her foster parents were tall, Charlotte awkwardly admits she does not actually know her real parents. A sudden heavy silence immediately drops over the bustling dinner table. Desperate to break the awkward tension, Suzanne's sister quickly claims she is just incredibly jealous of Charlotte's impressive height. The family sincerely apologizes for the rude question, but Charlotte smiles gently and declares her foster parents are her absolute pride. Changing the subject entirely, Suzanne excitedly announces to the table that Charlotte fit her masterpiece dress perfectly. Blushing with pure pride, Suzanne boasts about how incredibly wonderful the garment looked on her friend. Seizing the cheerful moment, Charlotte politely asks Suzanne if she can take the discarded embroidery thread from the wardrobe's trash bin. Explaining her passion, Charlotte reveals her mother trained her strictly in embroidery, and she genuinely loves crafting her own designs. Hearing this, Suzanne's father quietly approaches with a neat stack of leftover fabric scraps from their workshop. He generously offers the beautiful materials to Charlotte and insists she take them for her personal projects. Charlotte gasps in sheer amazement as he places the high-quality fabrics directly into her waiting hands. Reassuring her that they are merely leftovers, he encourages her to freely embroider whatever she likes on them. Afraid they might laugh, Charlotte bashfully hesitates before revealing her chosen artistic design. When asked what she plans to embroider, she worries the incredibly fine fabric might be too delicate for her idea. Gathering her courage, she cheerfully declares her intention to embroider Pitchit, the little bird she lovingly raised. A vivid flashback strikes as a younger Charlotte tearfully begs her imposing father to save a tiny injured chick. Her stern father strictly explains that humans should never interfere with the brutal reality of nature. Pressing his harsh lesson, he challenges her reasoning and points out that she is merely judging life's value based entirely on appearances. He sternly questions why she saved the pitiful chick, but chose to let the frightening snake starve to death. Recalling her desperate childhood efforts, Charlotte remembers gently placing a tiny splint on the bird's injured leg. Staring at the fragile creature, her father questions if the abandoned chick will even survive without its true parents. Charlotte trembles under her father's intense gaze as she tightly clutches the helpless bird to her chest. Driven by fierce determination, the young girl desperately pleads for her father's permission to keep the animal. Tears welling in her eyes, she boldly vows to raise the injured creature entirely on her own. Yielding slightly to her fiery resolve, her father strictly commands her to take proper care of the fragile life. Nodding vigorously, young Charlotte shouts her absolute promise to protect the tiny bird. Returning to the present, she warmly smiles and notes that Pitchit still joyfully plays with her whenever she goes home. Startled by the intense story, Suzanne's family listens in absolute shock that her father initially told her to let the chick be eaten. Staring thoughtfully at her hands, Charlotte admits she saw her own abandoned self overlapping directly with that helpless little bird. Reflecting on the painful memory, she realizes her stern father simply wanted to teach her to truly think her choices through. She softly concludes that he was forcing her to question if her emotional choice was actually the right one to make. Reflecting deeply on the harsh consequences of an action, she solemnly remembers the grim lesson that the snake should have been left to die. The heavy burden of her past decisions violently weighs upon her as she continues to contemplate the true cost of acting. Her parents' foundational teachings vividly continue to illuminate her current path and deeply shape her unwavering moral compass. Feeling a sudden wave of anxious embarrassment, she nervously admits she might have overshared her most private, vulnerable thoughts. Mustering her trembling courage, Charlotte softly addresses Suzanne to reveal a lingering, deeply heartfelt sentiment. Suzanne immediately turns her full supportive attention toward her companion, patiently waiting for the upcoming confession. Expressing deep gratitude for the shared vulnerability, Suzanne warmly acknowledges that she finally understands the root of Charlotte's profound modesty. Suzanne tenderly confesses that witnessing the charming dimple on Charlotte's right cheek always fills her heart with immense, undeniable joy. A quiet, deeply contented hum fills the tranquil air, beautifully cementing the strong emotional bond between the two women. Bidding a warm and affectionate farewell, Suzanne wishes Charlotte a peaceful good night after their highly enjoyable evening together. Charlotte graciously returns the heartfelt appreciation, profoundly thanking her companion for the beautiful, unforgettable day they shared. The mutual affection powerfully lingers in the air as they silently acknowledge their deep shared happiness. The overwhelming silence heavily speaks volumes as the narrative dramatically pauses to let the profound emotions completely settle. Overwhelmed by a sudden rush of emotion, Charlotte realizes this is the first comforting embrace she has felt since her beloved mother's passing. Nostalgic, heartbreaking memories forcefully flood her mind of frigid winter nights spent wrapped safely in her mother's warm, loving arms. A dark, agonizing doubt suddenly shatters her peace as she desperately questions what truly befell her tragically lost family. She vividly recalls her father's fiercely protective warmth as he would carefully drape a thick, heavy fur over her shivering body. Hot tears violently well up as a bitter, howling wind perfectly echoes her agonizing, desperate sorrow of missing her parents. The narrative abruptly and violently shifts back exactly 1 year to the tragic, fateful events that permanently doomed the village of Niels. The rural fields of the quiet village stand completely still, blissfully unaware of the impending catastrophic destruction about to strike. Sudden chaotic confusion fiercely ripples through the tense air as frantic gasps violently shatter the village's tranquil silence. A blood-curdling, terrified scream rips through the serene atmosphere, instantly signaling the terrifying onset of an unstoppable disaster. Chaotic, deafening rumblings begin to violently shake the very foundations of the helpless village as the earth itself seemingly revolts. Panicked villagers desperately cry out in the chaotic dust, scrambling frantically to understand the sudden, overwhelming destruction raining down upon them. Absolute horror rapidly dawns upon the terrified crowds as they realize a massive, deadly landslide is viciously tearing down a mountain. Complete despair sets in as trapped survivors realize the catastrophic avalanche of Earth has completely obliterated the only escape highway. A horrified collective gasp escapes the panicked crowd as a doomed carriage is brutally crushed in the destructive path of the falling debris. A pained, breathless grunt painfully echoes from the devastating wreckage as a hidden survivor struggles against the crushing, suffocating weight. A desperate, heroic shout pierces through the choking dust, urgently calling out to anyone trapped within the chaotic, shifting ruin. Frantic rescuers scream into the terrifying, unstable rubble, desperately praying to find any lingering signs of life amidst the catastrophic destruction. Urgent, panicked voices continuously echo through the settling dust as the villagers furiously attempt to locate survivors hidden in the collapsed debris. A determined, commanding voice orders the trapped victims to hold on as they bravely launch a frantic, dangerous rescue mission into the collapse. Agonized, weak groans softly emanate from the twisted, buried wreckage, grimly signaling the immense physical toll of the brutal landslide. A weak, rapidly fading voice tragically begs for salvation from beneath the suffocating heavy layers of collapsed, unyielding earth. The frantic, bloody digging intensifies as gasps of breathless exhaustion seamlessly mix with the desperate, panicked race against the clock. A chilling, horrifying silence slowly begins to creep over the devastating wreckage as the frantic rescue efforts tragically stall. The sheer, catastrophic scale of the devastating tragedy becomes agonizingly clear amidst the broken, dusty remnants of the completely crushed village. An ominous, terrifying rumbling sound threatens a secondary collapse as a desperate breaking voice makes one final agonizing plea into the dark void. Unstable rocks shift and sharp gravel crumbles menacingly as the broken earth threatens to permanently bury the devastating, horrific scene. A crushing absolute wave of despair completely solidifies the grim reality that any further rescue attempts are already tragically, hopelessly doomed. A blood-curdling scream violently shatters the surrounding chaos as sudden panic completely overtakes the area. Thick dust fiercely swirls around the catastrophic wreckage as the brutal aftermath of the disaster heavily sets in. Exhausted and ragged pants echo heavily from the rubble as someone fights desperately for a single breath. The frantic gasping violently continues as sheer adrenaline pushes the trapped survivor past their physical breaking point. Desperately trying to revive the unconscious victim, a panicked voice loudly screams for him to wake up. Heavy breaths accompany the frantic and terrified struggle to force life back into the motionless man. Realizing the victim is completely unresponsive, the determined rescuer urgently initiates emergency first aid. Gritting through the absolute lack of medical help, the rescuer successfully stops the severe head bleeding and stabilizes a broken bone. Deeply grieving the missing foster parents, the rescuer sadly reflects on their powerful familial bond despite lacking any blood ties. The severely injured man finally regains consciousness and slowly identifies himself to his savior as Kevin. Kevin tragically reveals he suffers from severe amnesia and cannot recall anything regarding his recent past or his lost family. Gently probing his violently fractured mind, the rescuer softly asks Kevin to share whatever distant memories he can still access. Muttering a quiet apology, Kevin deeply expresses his immense gratitude for the crucial life-saving assistance. Urging the battered man to recover his vital strength, the rescuer softly advises Kevin to rest quietly. A sudden and sharp bang violently snaps the quiet atmosphere as a distant memory triggers an unexpected psychological shock. The rescuer wisely decides to conceal the traumatic carriage accident to prevent causing Kevin any unnecessary mental anguish. Analyzing his highly muscular build, the rescuer silently wonders what dangerous profession this well-trained stranger previously held. Plunging deep into his fractured consciousness, Kevin desperately tries to firmly grasp his final fading memory. Vivid and fragmented shadows of a forgotten past slowly begin to materialize in his rapidly recovering mind. Immensely frustrated by the massive mental void, Kevin realizes his recent memories have been completely and ruthlessly wiped away. A dramatic flashback reveals the young king tragically died of a sudden illness shortly after marrying Lady Sophia. Exactly 17 years ago, dark and tragic events permanently altered the royal lineage of the Kingdom of Banders. Treacherous whispers rapidly infected the fearful streets with dark rumors that the young king was actually poisoned. The tragic royal assassination horrifically occurred just as Lady Sophia discovered she was carrying the king's rightful heir. Seizing the sudden power vacuum, the king's younger brother Jocelyn was rapidly and suspiciously crowned as the new reigning monarch. Desperate for absolute loyalty, Lady Sophia urgently summons her most trusted royal servants Lise and Kevin. Startled by the sudden call, the fiercely loyal servants nervously ask how they can best serve their grieving queen. With a remarkably heavy heart, Lady Sophia tearfully admits she has been pondering a dangerous plan since her husband's tragic demise. Staring intensely at her beloved guards, the desperate queen prepares to ask them for the ultimate dangerous sacrifice. Fiercely determined to protect her unborn child, Sophia begs them to flee the kingdom and raise the baby as their own. Shocked by the immense treasonous weight of the royal request, Lise and Kevin gasp in utter disbelief. Sophia heavily hands them a large bag of survival gold and her royal ring to act as a crucial future keepsake. Horrified by her highly fatalistic preparations, the heartbroken servants desperately beg their beloved queen to stop speaking of her own doom. Revealing she knows of their secret romance, Sophia powerfully urges the stunned couple to escape and build a loving family. Refusing to instantly accept her suicidal plea, the loyal servants tearfully beg the resolute queen to reconsider her tragic path. Sophia solemnly explains they cannot risk the new king's lethal paranoia since her treacherous brother already possesses his own heirs. Driven by fierce maternal instinct, Sophia forcefully declares that remaining in the treacherous castle guarantees her child's brutal murder. Trapped by political enemies, she grimly admits her own family would coldly hand the infant directly over to her power-hungry brother. Taking a final and steadying breath, the doomed queen tragically prepares to permanently seal their highly dangerous, life-saving pact. Begging for their ultimate loyalty, Sophia tragically confesses they are the absolute only souls she can trust with her baby's precious life. Returning to seize the throne following his elder brother's suspicious death, the new king was previously exiled to a remote outpost without trial to avoid a fatal execution. Recalling a treacherous past, loyalists remember how Prince Jocelyn deliberately hurled a lethal sword directly at Crown Prince Ryan during a training exercise. Although Jocelyn cowardly dismissed the brutal attack as a mere misunderstanding, witnessing soldiers instantly recognized it as a calculated assassination attempt. Sensing an impending bloodbath, the retainers realize Lady Sophia's desperate inquiries stem from her unborn child's undeniable claim to the throne. Analyzing the fractured royal lineage, they note that the newly crowned King Jocelyn holds merely a 3-year right of succession over former King Ryan's true heir. Dark suspicions of foul play solidify as chilling rumors of lethal poisoning circulate regarding the former king's sudden demise. An oppressive tension suffocates the room as the horrific reality of the merciless succession war finally dawns upon the royal loyalists. Acknowledging the Kingdom of Banter's genderblind inheritance laws, they conclude that Lady Sophia's royal child will undoubtedly become a prime target for assassination. Understanding King Jocelyn's ruthless ambition, they know he will never cease his deadly pursuit as long as the child survives as a royal threat. Grasping for a desperate lifeline, a loyalist suggests that officially renouncing the unborn child's claim to the throne might guarantee its survival. Panic utterly shatters their strategic planning when Lady Sophia suddenly collapses in the agonizing grip of premature labor. Writhing in sheer agony, the former queen desperately pleads for immediate salvation as violent contractions overwhelm her fragile body. Springing into frenzied action, Kevin urgently acknowledges the command and sprints away to summon a doctor. Pushing through the immense pain, Lady Sophia commands her protectors to raise the child strongly, naming him Charles or her Charlotte to ensure their ultimate survival. Swearing a blood oath, a fiercely loyal knight vows to protect the unborn royal's life with every ounce of his formidable strength. Dread mounts in the bloody chambers as the grueling physical toll of the brutal, prolonged childbirth rapidly escalates. Hearts pound with sheer terror as the horrifying realization hits that the fragile baby is rapidly losing strength inside the womb. Utter exhaustion ravages the bloody room as 2 agonizing days of continuous labor push Lady Sophia to the absolute brink of death. Frantic screams erupt among the caretakers as unstoppable, catastrophic bleeding threatens to extinguish Lady Sophia's rapidly fading pulse. A fleeting wave of relief washes over the exhausted room as the piercing, triumphant cries of a newborn signal the end of the harrowing delivery. The joyous wails of the infant are tragically drowned out by the grim, horrific sight of Lady Sophia succumbing to massive blood loss. Paralyzing sorrow grips the loyal attendants as they realize absolutely nothing more can be done to save their beloved queen. Forcing his shattered mind to focus on the living, a devoted attendant urgently rushes out to secure vital milk from a wet nurse. A crushing wave of despair smashes into the survivors as they mourn the devastating, fatal cost of the infant's successful birth. In the suffocating silence of the deathbed, the stark reality of their newfound, perilous responsibility settles heavily onto the remaining loyalists. A sudden, electrifying realization violently jolts the mourners from their grief as an immediate, deadly threat demands their attention. Stealing his absolute resolve, a brave companion immediately volunteers to accompany the wet nurse to guarantee her absolute protection. The frantic, deafening clatter of galloping hooves shatters the silent night as the loyalists execute a desperate, high-speed escape. Breathless and gripped by terror, the fleeing protectors push their exhausted bodies to the absolute limits of human endurance. The devastating, final confirmation of Lady Sophia's tragic death absolutely crushes the fragile hopes of those inquiring about her survival. Swallowing their bitter tears, the devastated loyalists absorb the catastrophic blow of their fallen queen with heavy, agonized groans. Honoring Lady Sophia's sacred dying wish, the 2 lone survivors swear an unbreakable pact to name and raise the royal child in total secrecy. With a solemn, unified nod of unyielding conviction. The ultimate pledge to fiercely protect the kingdom's true bloodline is permanently sealed. Time blurs into a hazy nightmare as the Loyalists embark on a harsh, unforgiving exile far beyond the treacherous borders of their fallen homeland. Fighting through the thick fog of amnesia, a protector suddenly recalls the fractured, desperate memories of their daring escape from the country. Waking in a disoriented panic, he desperately calls out into the unknown void for Lise and the young Lady Charlotte. Staring horrified at his own reflection, the protector reels in absolute shock upon realizing he has inexplicably aged to nearly 50 years old. Sometime later, a gentle knock interrupts the tense silence as a visitor checks on the slow, grueling recovery of Kevin's shattered leg. Immense relief fills the quiet room as Kevin confidently announces his severe injuries have healed enough to allow him to sprint without any problems. Preparing for their next dangerous move, they resolve to post a notice with the town guard, fully aware that Kevin's fractured memory remains a potentially lethal liability. Claire desperately pleads with Kevin not to post his notice, fearing someone dangerous might recognize him. Excusing himself, politely Kevin heads outside to chop firewood as a way to repay Claire's kindness. Staring intently, Claire realizes she can never reveal the dark secret behind why Kevin's plan is impossible. Apologizing for prying, Claire respectfully drops her questioning as she senses his unspoken burdens. Listening to the rhythmic chopping, she concludes Kevin carries heavy circumstances he simply cannot share. Despite his hidden past, Claire finds genuine comfort and pleasure in her daily conversations with him. Observing his diligent nature, she feels absolutely certain that Kevin is fundamentally a good person. Demonstrating his gratitude, Kevin consistently assists her with grueling field work and hauling heavy loads. A warm smile graces Claire's face as she cherishes the comforting presence of another person in her home. Having lived entirely alone since losing her husband 20 years ago, Claire slowly embraces this long-forgotten warmth. The sharp, echoing clang of the axe striking wood abruptly punctuates the peaceful silence of the homestead. Wiping sweat from his brow, Kevin takes a brief, exhausting moment to catch his breath. Gripping the axe tightly, he silently vows to leave eventually because he must desperately find Lady Charlotte. Frustration courses through Kevin as he bitterly laments his stubborn, unyielding amnesia. Turning back to his savior, Kevin firmly states that he must depart soon to locate someone extremely important. Holding her hands with profound gratitude, he promises to repay Claire someday for nursing him back to health. Moved by her immense care, Kevin firmly reiterates his deep vow to return her boundless generosity. Stealing her courage, Claire finally addresses Kevin to confess a heavy secret she has been withholding. Tearfully apologizing, she admits she hid the truth out of overwhelming pity for his tormented memory loss suffering. Trembling slightly, Claire reveals she never checked if anyone was actually trapped inside the carriage wreckage. With a heavy heart, she explains that the carriage was completely crushed by a violent landslide before plummeting down the cliff during a second collapse. Shock violently shatters Kevin's composure as the horrifying truth crashes into his recovering mind. The devastating memory of the carriage being destroyed in the landslide brutally assaults his returning consciousness. Gasping for air, Kevin staggers backward as sudden, agonizing flashes of the disaster flood his brain. A primal groan escapes his lips as the crushing weight of the fatal accident completely overwhelms him. Staring in pure horror, Claire watches Kevin helplessly spiral into a dark pit of despair. Absolute dread paralyzes his body as the horrifying realization of their potential deaths firmly takes hold. Desperately clinging to hope, Kevin frantically pledges to continue helping with the fields regardless of the carriage's tragic fate. Falling to his knees, he tearfully begs Claire to let him stay at the farm just a little longer. Offering a warm, gentle smile, Claire immediately welcomes him to remain in her home for as long as he desires. Overwhelmed by relief, Kevin bows deeply to express his profound thanks for her unwavering compassion. Shaking off the grim visions, he aggressively refuses to believe his two precious companions were buried in the rubble. Whispering their names into the wind, he fiercely holds onto the fading hope that Lady Charlotte and Lise somehow survived. Meanwhile, in a distant location, sheer panic erupts as someone discovers the royal child has vanished without a trace. A furious roar echoes through the halls as the shocking news of the disappearance violently hits the commander. Scrambling the elite search party, the terrified guards frantically mobilize to recover the missing heir. Chaos utterly consumes the estate as the terrifying reality of this absolute disaster fully sets in. The very next day at Baron Orban's estate, the Baron reacts with pure shock upon hearing alarming news about his daughter Lise. A cold voice sternly reminds the listener that they only escaped a death sentence due to the mercy bestowed by Lady Sophia's father, former Marquis Hervé. Bowing his head in grim submission, the reprimanded man quietly accepts the harsh terms of his absolute survival. A ruthless decree immediately terminates the civil minister's esteemed position and strips away all remaining authority. Shock grips the court as they realize the loyal handmaid, Lise, actually fled with the royal child. Holding on to hope, a former ally confidently asserts that the bright Lise undoubtedly had profound reasons for her drastic escape. Heavy tension settles over the silent observers as they deeply ponder the perilous consequences of the handmaid's daring betrayal. A quiet murmur of agreement echoes through the dim halls to solidify their unwavering faith in Lise's hidden motives. Far away and hiding in distress, Lise agonizes over the immense trouble her sudden disappearance has undoubtedly caused her beloved family. Smiling warmly at the one-year-old Charlotte, Lise tenderly snips a small lock of the infant's hair to send as proof of life. Seeking to ease her heavy guilt, she reassures her companion that she secretly dispatched an explanatory letter to her worried family. Acknowledging her careful planning, her companion nods in steady agreement to validate the risky but necessary correspondence. Taking a deep breath, Lise firmly convinces herself that her desperate family will ultimately understand her drastic choice to flee. Back at the Grand Estate, a startling disruption occurs when a mysterious, unmarked letter suddenly arrives for the Lord. A loyal servant hastily approaches his seated master to urgently present the unexpected correspondence from an unknown sender. Intense curiosity flares as the seasoned nobleman firmly grasps the strange envelope containing potentially explosive secrets. Felix, the former Marquis Hervé, immediately commands his servant to deliver the letter directly to his wife Josephine. Reading the message, they discover Lady Sophia's child Charlotte is thriving and receive the enclosed lock of hair from her first birthday. Gazing fondly at the delicate hair, the grieving grandparents deeply imagine the young child inheriting Sophia's beautiful face. Overwhelmed by this solitary piece of physical evidence, the former Marquis solemnly vows to never demand anything more. Josephine expresses profound relief that Charlotte is growing up safely despite the initial shock of receiving Lise's very first letter. Heavy guilt washes over the aging couple as they lament, causing the Orban family immense trouble while secretly funding the fugitives. Felix declares his eternal gratitude for the unwavering loyalty of the two protectors, raising their precious grandchild in complete secrecy. Years later, in their hidden sanctuary, a weary Lise suddenly clutches her abdomen as a sharp pain brutally assaults her. A horrifying realization strikes her as the mysterious, agonizing stomach pain violently intensifies with each passing day. Collapsing forward, Lise lets out a strangled gasp as an unbearable wave of agony ruthlessly tears through her fragile body. Forcing a strained smile, she desperately lies to her worried daughter by brushing off the terrifying pain as a mere passing discomfort. Suspicion lingers heavily in the air as the young girl silently observes her mother's clearly deteriorating physical condition. Quickly changing the subject, Lise urgently instructs her daughter to fetch her father for their prepared meal. Nodding hesitantly, the obedient girl turns away to fulfill her mother's urgent request despite her lingering anxieties. Left alone, tears well in Lise's eyes as she fiercely resolves to see her estranged family just once more before death claims her. Acknowledging her devastating terminal state, her devoted husband, Rick, solemnly accepts her final desperate wish. A heavy, somber silence suffocates the room as the grim reality of Lise's impending demise firmly takes root in their lives. Rick sorrowfully warns that a harsh journey to their homeland would instantly kill her despite her desperate desire to survive for Charlotte. Refusing to let her die with regrets, Rick decisively promises to send a letter summoning her older brother to their distant sanctuary. Immense gratitude floods Lisa's weakening heart as she tearfully thanks Rick for orchestrating this impossible final reunion. A lingering shadow of doubt threatens their fragile hope as they heavily weigh the immense danger of contacting her noble brother. Back in the homeland, Aiden Orban stares in absolute shock at a sudden mysterious letter bearing his name. His eyes widen in pure disbelief as he recognizes his long-lost sister Lisa's handwriting upon the aged parchment. Reading the tragic words, Aiden learns of Lisa's dying wish to see her father, mother, and brother one last time. Heartbreak completely shatters his composure as he realizes this devastating farewell is the first word from her in 16 agonizing years. Overcome with immense grief and pride, he recognizes she sacrificed a peaceful life solely to honor Lady Sophia's dying wish. Igniting with fierce determination, Aiden vows to overcome any obstacle and travel to her side, no matter the cost. Holding a delayed letter, she realizes the tragic timing robbed her of a final reunion with her parents. Commanding immediate attention, a stern voice urgently calls out to Martha to listen closely. The quiet, isolated atmosphere of the Nils settlement immediately establishes a tense and desolate setting. Acknowledging the unspoken stakes, someone murmurs their understanding as a heavy cart rattles nearby. Warned that the king's royal guards might be tailing her brother, she is instructed to conceal herself in the brush and observe carefully. Peering cautiously through the dense foliage, she spots a suspicious figure looming quietly in the distance. Tension mounts in absolute silence as the hidden observer intensely watches the shadowy approach. Confirming his unwavering allegiance to Lord Aiden, a man reveals he has been secretly living alongside Lise. Glancing around nervously, someone heavily scans the quiet surroundings for any sudden sign of an ambush. Squinting through the oppressive shadows, a hidden watcher questions if the rapidly approaching man is actually Kevin. Demanding to see the gravely ill Lise immediately, an anxious man pushes forward with frantic, unstoppable energy. Heavy footsteps forcefully rumble across the wooden floorboards as he rushes blindly inside the structure. A sudden gasp of pure, unfiltered shock escapes his lips upon witnessing the horrific, bloody scene before him. Breathless, suffocating silence echoes heavily within the dim and entirely desolate room. Absolute horror strikes as they recognize Kevin's devastating state, utterly refusing to believe their own terrified eyes. Desperately shaking her motionless brother, she frantically begs Kevin to open his eyes while screaming hysterically for Lise. Blind panic consumes her as she checks his unresponsive body, desperately pleading for any lingering sign of life. A heart-wrenching, agonizing scream for Lise violently shatters the heavy, dread-filled air of the shattered home. A sudden, terrifyingly weak groan barely breaks the overwhelming stillness of the massacre. Collapsing under the weight of crushing guilt, someone cries out that Rick's grim fate is entirely their own tragic fault. Resolving to save the freezing Lise, a determined survivor forcefully declares they must immediately relocate to find desperately needed warmth. Casting one last, agonizing look back at Kevin's fallen body, they prepare to hastily flee the nightmare. Suffocating dread intensifies as they realize the deeply wounded Lise has slipped completely into a deep, dangerous unconsciousness. Swearing a tearful oath to return, the survivor abandons Kevin's lifeless body, accepting he is already far beyond saving. Struggling against overwhelming physical exhaustion, they push forward with desperate hope toward a distant, unseen refuge. A ragged, breathless pant violently escapes as their physical stamina rapidly drains away into the freezing night air. Remembering a nearby farmhouse from their earlier journey, they pivot sharply toward the potential shelter to save Lise. Heartbroken but fiercely resolute, they carry the loyal Lise, hoping only to grant her a peaceful, warm resting place. Scooping her fragile body up, the rescuer is profoundly horrified by how shockingly light she has suddenly become. Arriving at the farmhouse door, they invent a desperate cover story about a landslide to plead for emergency shelter. Pounding desperately on the heavy wooden door, they violently shout into the cold night for immediate, life-saving assistance. A startled but endlessly kind host quickly ushers the desperate, freezing travelers inside to a spare, warm room. A flicker of fragile hope reignites as Lise suddenly stirs with a pained groan and slowly opens her exhausted eyes, expressing profound gratitude for the warm sanctuary. They accept the grim reality that absolutely no medical help is available nearby. Tormented by a massive secret, the survivor internally debates whether to reveal Charlotte's hidden location to their brother. Wheezing heavily, the rapidly fading Lise accepts her fast-approaching death with a quiet, tragically calm resignation. A somber, devastating realization completely sets in that they have already crossed the absolute point of no return. With her final breaths, she fiercely wishes for her loved one to sever all royal ties and live a peacefully ordinary life. A final, agonizing choke brutally escapes her lips as the absolute last remnants of her bodily strength fade into nothingness. Whispering a tragic, heartbreaking final farewell to her brother, she completely surrenders to the rapidly encroaching darkness. Stepping up to take charge, someone urgently demands to know Lady Charlotte's whereabouts while vowing to retrieve the child. Filled with bittersweet gratitude, a voice softly apologizes for the trouble caused while expressing immense joy at their reunion. Heavy silence falls over the tragic scene as the lingering emotions of their heartfelt encounter echo through the air. Time seems to stand utterly still, amplifying the crushing weight of the devastating situation at hand. A sudden, desperate cry shatters the quiet by intensely calling out Kevin's name into the void. Empty stillness answers the painful shout, deepening the terrifying uncertainty of his grim fate. Shadows lengthen ominously across the terrain as the grim reality of their desperate circumstances sets in. Whispering a fragmented prayer of thanks, a broken voice struggles to convey its final heartfelt gratitude. Clinging to a desperate glimmer of hope, someone intensely begs their loved one to simply live. A fading breath barely utters the word life before trailing off into a chilling, uncertain silence. Crying out in sudden alarm, a frantic voice screams for Charlotte and Mama amidst the unfolding chaos. Confessing a tragic truth, Talise, a survivor, reveals they returned for Kevin but found him entirely gone. A profound, suffocating sorrow hangs heavy in the air as the painful absence of their missing companion takes hold. Gripped by overwhelming guilt, Lord Hervey tragically apologizes for leaving them completely alone in a distant foreign land. Accepting a bitter defeat, he admits that while someone might have rescued him, there is absolutely no way to search further. Offering gentle comfort to the fallen, a soothing voice assures them that Mom and Dad are eagerly waiting beyond. Overflowing with sorrowful love, they softly grant the incredibly loyal Lise permission to finally rest easy. Shifting gears with cold efficiency, a stern command orders a subordinate to fulfill their duty and hunt for the former king's leads. A tense, brooding silence descends as the heavy weight of the newly assigned dangerous mission sinks in entirely. A sharp rustling sound suddenly cuts through the quiet atmosphere, signaling unexpected and rapid movement nearby. Frantic preparations ignite absolute chaos as panicked staff scramble to secure enough wine and accommodations for the upcoming evening ball. Shouting commands across the bustling halls, a supervisor demands flawless execution for Crown Prince Ibrahim's extravagant 20th birthday celebration. Whispers of deep concern ripple through the castle corridors as servants note His Majesty's visibly terrible and exhausting illness. Harboring a shred of desperate hope, someone softly prays that Leon will at least accomplish his harrowing task. Realizing the king's waning interest, the lone remaining assassin notes that the original 10 killers hunting the kidnapped daughter were never replaced. A sudden sharp trill disrupts the killer's dark thoughts, pulling him sharply back into the dangerous present reality. Staring blankly ahead, the solitary assassin hardens his resolve for the treacherous path that lies immediately before him. Suspecting Charlotte's true identity, Leon steels himself to once again face the crushing, deadly mission imposed upon him. Unveiling a deeply hidden history, the story plunges fiercely into the gardener's traumatic past and the ultimate truth. Exploding with furious outrage, someone violently screams that they have finally had absolutely enough of this madness. Screaming about inevitable execution, an angry voice furiously questions if this dangerous mess is another dirty job from Prince Jocelyn. Sick of being dragged into the chaos, an enraged mother declares she is leaving immediately and refuses to be stopped. Trembling with immense fear, a terrified child tearfully asks their father what will tragically happen to them now. Roaring with tyrannical fury, the violent father forcefully reminds his terrified children that they are his sons. Demanding absolute obedience, he viciously orders that they will take over his gruesome job the moment he can no longer work. Trapped by their father's escalating terrifying violence after their mother fled, the young children had absolutely no choice but to obey. Enduring relentless beatings, the boys watched their tyrannical father grow old, fall ill, and face a forced bitter retirement. Snapping back to the harsh reality of several years later, the cruel father aggressively orders his grown sons to listen up. Barking a final ruthless command, he orders them to work hard, earn money, and eliminate the former king's hidden daughter. Looming ominously against the dark horizon, the imposing Banter's castle stands as the ultimate staging ground for this deadly conspiracy. Reviewing their meager clues, they deduce the target likely has brown eyes and dark blonde hair. Though they possess unknown allies, the sheer difficulty of the mission weighs heavily on their minds. Staring into the distance, one brother heavily questions how many agonizing years this search will consume. Frustrated by the lack of leads, the younger brother admits they have almost no way to find her. For years, Leon and his brother relentlessly scoured every hidden corner of the Banter's kingdom with completely fruitless results. Wandering endlessly, the exhausted duo pushes through the dense and unforgiving wilderness. Heavy silence envelopes the weary travelers as their grueling journey takes a visible toll on their stamina. Trudging through another desolate area, they brace themselves for yet another bitterly disappointing dead end. Exhausted and utterly defeated, they realize she might have completely fled the country long ago. Suddenly collapsing, the older brother alarms Leon, who frantically screams out his name in sheer panic. Coughing up violently, the older brother slumps forward as Leon desperately checks his rapidly deteriorating condition. Gasping for air, the dying man struggles immensely against the agonizing pain tearing through his chest. Accepting his grim fate, the older brother apologizes to Leon and admits this is the absolute end of the road for him. Refusing to accept reality, Leon frantically begs his brother to hang on and survive this nightmare. Reflecting on their tragic childhood, Leon realizes they blindly followed their cruel father because they simply had no other choice. Gazing at Leon with fading eyes, the dying brother shares one final, incredibly heavy look of regret. With their tyrannical father finally dead, the older brother softly questions if they must truly continue this cursed path. Using his absolute last breath, he desperately urges Leon to at least find his own freedom. Tears stream down Leon's face as he helplessly watches his beloved older brother pass away completely. Filled with crushing bitterness, Leon laments that his brother died tragically without accomplishing a single meaningful thing. Staring at the lifeless body, a devastated Leon heavily questions the absolute entire point of their miserable existence. Pushing his dark thoughts aside, Leon steels his resolve to ensure his brother's endless hardships were not in vain. Arriving at the bustling town of Kingstone, Leon immediately begins heavily analyzing his surroundings for new clues. Deducing their target's limits, Leon figures a former soldier would absolutely have to live near a town to survive. Catching a sudden glimpse of movement, Leon sharpens his focus on the lively marketplace crowd. Approaching a local vendor, Leon smoothly excuses himself to ask about a specific husband and wife. Suspicious of the stranger, the townsfolk immediately question exactly what business Leon has with the missing couple. Weaving a clever lie, Leon claims his father sent him to retrieve his disowned aunt and uncle after their grandfather's death. Connecting the fabricated story, the locals note the description perfectly matches Rick the hunter and his family. Revealing a crucial detail, the vendor explains that the hunted couple has not visited the market in over a year. Recalling vague rumors, a local suggests the family lived in the western forest but might have completely moved away. Expressing his deep gratitude, Leon thanks the helpful townsfolk for their incredibly valuable information. Venturing deep into the isolated woods, Leon remains highly alert for any sign of the hidden hunter's cabin. Trudging through the thick foliage, Leon heavily wonders if this will become just another tragically wasted trip. Navigating the quiet wilderness, the seasoned assassin moves with absolute stealth and deadly precision. Spotting a structure ahead, Leon silently prays this promising lead finally pays off after years of failure. Approaching the isolated house, he heavily inspects the quiet grounds for any lingering signs of life. Breaking inside, Leon is shocked to find the abandoned house surprisingly clean despite lacking absolutely any food. Exhausted from his journey, the lone assassin decides to briefly rest inside the eerie, completely empty home. Settling into the quiet shadows, Leon prepares himself for the dangerous, inevitable confrontation that fiercely awaits him. An enraged voice viciously screams for the intruder to get out immediately. Someone lets out a sharp gasp of pure shock due to the sudden outburst. Tension thickens the air as the dramatic confrontation abruptly escalates in a heavy silence. Shadows stretch ominously across the room, while the sheer intensity of the moment lingers heavily. The frustrated occupant violently slams a heavy door to completely shut out the outside world. The weary hunter firmly confirms she is the elusive child after realizing she perfectly matches the former queen's portrait. He bitterly admits to himself that he lacks even a single shred of personal faith. He heavily contemplates the cruel divine irony of this fateful encounter after so many fruitless years. He marvels that the incredibly innocent girl willingly gave her very last piece of bread to the dangerous intruder destined to kill her. Cursing his dark fate, he grimly acknowledges that being an assassin is truly the worst kind of job imaginable. The conflicted killer struggles immensely beneath the crushing weight of his murderous duty. He desperately wonders if his grueling lifelong journey was solely meant to execute a girl living such a tragically meager life. A sudden, ghostly whisper of his brother's voice sharply pierces his troubled mind. He fiercely convinces himself that the haunting voice was nothing more than a trick of his exhausted imagination. The hardened assassin wrestles fiercely with the turbulent emotions tearing at his conflicted soul. He silently considers that his grand realization about her identity might have been a complete mistake. Refusing to rush his judgment, he firmly decides that it is still far too early to be absolutely certain. The weary traveler finally succumbs to a deep and heavy slumber. A sharp metallic clink violently shatters the peaceful quiet of the resting chamber. He silently observes the surrounding shadows for any immediate sign of hidden danger. His eyes narrow fiercely as he creeps closer to investigate the mysterious sound. The veteran killer calculates his next critical move with absolute cold precision. He realizes the royal daughter works obliviously as a lowly servant because she was never told of her true origins. He absorbs the sheer magnitude of her shockingly degraded lifestyle while staring intently at the massive foreign castle. He forcefully steadies himself against the rough stone wall while processing the massive implications of his grim discovery. He releases a profound breath filled with years of accumulated frustration. He feels the crushing isolation of a life spent hunting in the shadows while gazing up at the sprawling architecture. He bitterly questions if he must forever live as the lowest form of trash just because he was sired by a despicable man. He abruptly halts his dark train of thought to reevaluate his precarious situation after sudden realization. He fears there is no guarantee his royal employers will not dispose of him like worthless trash once his mission concludes. He trembles with newfound clarity upon realizing that blindly following brutal orders might guarantee his own violent execution. He calculates that his sudden death would permanently bury the kingdom's darkest secrets, since he is the sole remaining operative. He pragmatically decides there is no need to rush an assassination that has already consumed so many long years. He forcefully vows to seize absolute control over his own uncertain destiny while clenching his fist with surging determination. He intensely questions a mysterious flash of light that just erupted in the distance. He profoundly senses that he has finally reached a massive, irreversible turning point in his miserable life. He resolves to temporarily retreat and report his initial findings directly to King Jocelyn while brushing off the strange light. Panicked voices suddenly cry out in desperate alarm to check on His Highness's safety. The royal figure forcefully insists he is perfectly fine after merely losing his balance for a fleeting second. The breathless survivor violently attempts to steady his wildly racing heart amidst the lingering chaos. Trembling in relief, someone whispers that they narrowly avoided being noticed by the intimidating stranger. Noticing a strange aura radiating from the man, the observer silently wonders if he is a new recruit. The hidden watcher firmly realizes they have absolutely never seen his unfamiliar face before. A desperate voice suddenly cries out for someone to please stop their dangerous actions. Screaming in pure panic, someone frantically calls out Prince Aurelian's name. A brief moment of sheer confusion flashes as an oblivious voice mutters in surprise. Losing his balance, completely Prince Aurelian shrieks as he slips wildly off the edge. Terrified, guards scream in absolute horror as His Highness plunges toward the ground. Furious at the reckless stunt, the king furiously scolds Aurelian for repeatedly sliding down the banister. Refusing to accept any more excuses, the king sternly commands guards to watch the prince 24 hours a day. Forced into total submission, Aurelian is aggressively ordered to simply say yes to his father's harsh decree. Pouting intensely, a thoroughly frustrated Aurelian drags out his reluctant agreement while being yelled at. Defending his shattered pride, the young prince insists he would never make a mistake that could break his neck. Smiling warmly at the chaotic scene, an amused observer notes that this is a classic case of like father, like son. The observer cheerfully reveals that His Majesty made the exact same excuses when he broke a bone, causing mischief as a boy. An advisor calmly assures everyone that this small slip-up will ultimately serve as an excellent lesson for the young prince. Trapped indoors, Aurelian tragically laments missing the birth of the spring lamb and the hatching of the praying mantis eggs. He bitterly complains about completely missing out on the early spring strawberries that the gardener secretly sneaks to him. Huffing in intense annoyance, the grumpy prince complains that the guard assigned to him today is incredibly mean. Dramatically slumping in defeat, Aurelian pitifully declares that this absolute boredom is the end of the world. A sudden sharp knock echoes forcefully against the heavy wooden door of his confinement. A playful voice loudly mimics a rooster's crow to shatter the oppressive silence of the room. Startled by the ridiculous noise, the vigilant guard quickly glances around to locate the source. Intercepting the sneaking prince, the stern guard immediately demands to know exactly where His Highness is going. Smirking confidently, Aurelian mockingly accuses the guard of being terrible for supposedly sleeping on the job. When the guard calmly denies sleeping, a furious Aurelian brands him as mean, lazy, and a total liar. Sighing heavily in frustration, the prince desperately wishes his friend Shimon was there instead of this strict babysitter. Surprising the grumpy prince, the guard respectfully offers to carry him all the way up to the watchtower. Aurelian completely freezes in sheer disbelief at the strict guard's incredibly unexpected act of kindness. Realizing the guard actually has a considerate side, a delighted Aurelian eagerly accepts the generous offer. Refusing to compromise on safety, the guard insists Aurelian must change into warmer clothes before braving the cold outside. Peering curiously from the high watchtower, Aurelian suddenly spots Shimon training intensely with an unfamiliar woman. Ignoring the guard's warnings to head back, Aurelian urgently demands a special favor to go fetch Shimon immediately. Confronting his friend directly, Aurelian fiercely interrogates a highly startled Shimon about the mysterious woman. Sweating nervously, a flustered Shimon attempts to maintain his composure while politely greeting His Highness. Thrilled by the secret, Aurelian excitedly demands Shimon bring her next time while promising to hide it from his parents. Shimon stands frozen in visible panic as the demanding prince places immense pressure squarely on his shoulders. Aurelian astutely notes that since Shimon is royal blood, his secret morning training with a commoner would cause a massive scandal. Oblivious to his friend's absolute terror, Aurelian gleefully declares he will be eagerly looking forward to their next meeting. Releasing a heavily defeated sigh, a reluctant Shimon respectfully begs for a little time to figure out the prince's dangerous request. A stern woman strictly tells Lord Shimon that his unreasonable request puts the entire Maid staff in a difficult position. Surrounding maids excitedly fawn over the handsome Lord Shimon as the stern head Maid formally acknowledges his high status. Yielding to his undeniable charm, the head maid reluctantly agrees to lend him Charlotte for just one single day. Apologizing for the sudden imposition, Lord Shimon explains that His Highness is likely bored and unable to move due to his recent injury. Firmly standing her ground astern, Maid demands Lord Shimon refrain from making such incredibly difficult requests. Distracted maids whisper excitedly about the handsome Lord Shimon, while the head maid sighs in deep exasperation. Conceding defeat with a heavy sigh, the strict woman agrees to let Charlotte go with him for only one day. Expressing his deep apologies, Shimon reveals that the injured prince desperately needs some company to cure his absolute boredom. Shocked by the sudden news, the other maids scream in sheer disbelief upon realizing Charlotte is actually being taken away. Bewildered by the unexpected summons, Charlotte silently wonders what this sudden royal meeting could possibly be about. Asserting her strict authority, the head maid forcefully reminds Shimon that Charlotte must absolutely return by the end of the day. Panicking internally, a completely lost Charlotte desperately wonders what on earth she is actually supposed to do next. Calmly assessing the situation, Shimon explains that the prince simply wants someone to talk to since his broken arm prevents swordplay. Connecting the dots, Shimon realizes that Prince Aurelian must have secretly watched their intense morning training the other day. Reassuring a visibly nervous Charlotte about her lack of royal etiquette, Shimon gently knocks on the prince's private door. Entering the grand room, Charlotte bows deeply and formally greets Prince Aurelian as a humble handmaid. Smiling with eager curiosity, Prince Aurelian casually greets the nervous handmaid and immediately confirms her true identity. Intrigued by her incredible combat skills, the prince enthusiastically questions if Charlotte actually comes from a noble knight's family. Answering truthfully, Charlotte explains that her father was merely a forest hunter and she blindly assumed all fathers practiced swordplay. Staring in silent astonishment, Shimon realizes this is the absolute first time he is hearing about her deeply hidden past. A heavy contemplative silence fills the massive royal chamber as the shocking revelation fully sinks in. Gazing sympathetically at the young maid, Shimon silently reflects on the immense hardships Charlotte must have endured entirely alone. Pressing for more details, the prince curiously asks if she still frequently visits her distant forest home on her days off. Smiling softly, Charlotte assures the prince that she never feels lonely because she treats a wild little bird just like her own child. Clarifying her unique living situation, she proudly explains that the little bird she raised constantly comes to visit her isolated house. His eyes sparkling with absolute delight, Prince Aurelian practically vibrates with excitement as he declares his massive love for little birds. Unable to contain his bubbling enthusiasm, the eager prince desperately begs Shimon to let him meet the wonderful little bird. Instantly shutting down the reckless idea, Shimon firmly reminds the prince that they would absolutely need His Majesty's strict permission. Throwing a dramatic tantrum, Prince Aurelian screams at the top of his lungs that he desperately wants to visit Charlotte's house. Smiling with an unwavering, terrifying calmness, Shimon smoothly assures the panicking handmaid that there is absolutely no need to worry. Trembling in sheer terror, Charlotte frantically whispers to Shimon that her tiny wooden cabin could never possibly host a royal prince. Calling out the boy's blatant lie, Shimon playfully accuses the prince of using commoner studies as a cheap excuse just to see the bird. Refusing to budge an inch, Shimon coldly states he will only escort the prince if His Majesty officially grants his impossible permission. Slumping back in utter defeat, the sulking prince bitterly realizes that his luxurious royal position affords him almost zero true freedom. Moving to end the meeting, a professional, Shimon formally asks if he can finally return Charlotte to her pressing daily duties. Clinging desperately to the fleeting moment, Prince Aurelian stubbornly begs them to stay just a little longer to hear more fascinating forest stories.